2021 has been a tumultuous year, with all sorts of highs and all sorts of lows. Well, mostly lows, but it's at least a slight step up from the last 365-day period. And the same can certainly be said for this year's game controversies, because it was certainly a step up in terms of scale, grit, and outright batshit insanity. Trust me, the few incidents I covered on the main show proper was the mere entry point for the stuff going on this year. But before we delve into that, allow me to use this intro to state my intentions for this yearly shindig, in case I haven't already. 6 videos in. These are meant to be relatively concise looks at game controversies I didn't cover over this period of time, with the possibility of expanded coverage in the future, so just because something is featured here doesn't mean I won't give them their full dues eventually. I also won't be talking about every controversy that occurred over the past year, which I don't think many of y'all keep track of anyway, but this is just in case someone goes, but what about Limited Run or Sent, a Cyberpunk ghost story? Because yeah, people definitely remember that one. You hack, you fucking hack, you fucking hack. And for as much as I like to keep these videos a fun time for all to enjoy, we will see some incidents that contain things one may call political. And depending on how you define that term, you may not find that particularly enjoyable. But that sucks for you, because you'd be missing out on me talking about the biggest gaming controversies of 2021 that I missed. I do promise things won't get intense right off the bat, though. We'll be on a gradual curve. Like, ever since the Rockstar saga concluded, I felt less pressure to go all in on this stuff than I have in the past. And I just feel like taking a calmer approach to these situations is the right way to go. So let's kick things off with a nice, clean discussion of our first entry.
I've been in the hills fucking dudes.
You had one simple fucking job, and you couldn't even do that right! You dinks! Fucking cunts!
Okay, glad I got that out of my system. Something I notice about 2021's controversies is how many of them can be described by using words or phrases that start with RE. For example, 2021 was a year full of remastering. Or should I say, really bad remastering. We had plenty of examples to choose from for this segment, but yeah, it was going to be very obvious which one was going to take that. This past summer, Take-Two Interactive started up an extremely subtle campaign for potential remasters by throwing out a flurry of DMCA takedowns for various Grand Theft Auto mods. Some new, some ancient, all of which was the first strike against them, as all this did was whittle down any hype for whatever the hell was going to come out of it. But because this is the largest gaming franchise in the world, the hype was not going to go anywhere. And following that, Kotaku published an article claiming that the remasters in question would be ones for the 6th generation GTA games, 3, Vice City, and San Andreas, being developed by the newest addition to the Rockstar family, Rockstar Dundee, formerly Ruffian Games Limited, makers of these and assistant developers for these. For some reason, Take-Two and Rockstar continued to play coy for the next few months, even though it was super obvious to any schmuck that this was going to be a thing. And sure enough, it got officially announced on the 20th anniversary of GTA 3. Okay, yeah, this is cool and good. I'm liking this. As a fan of the original trilogy of video games that, in the worst case scenario, are still available on online stores, I can proudly show my excitement for the... Strike 2. A few weeks after that announcement, they put out a trailer for the Definitive Edition, and, well, personally, I don't think it looked terrible, but it sure as hell didn't look definitive. What with that new lighting system and them removing the grittier look the original games had, which felt integral to the GTA identity. The other noted additions did look promising though, and it turned out the actual dev behind this remaster was Wardrum Studios, who had been rebranded as Grove Street Games in the previous year. These fellows were responsible for various mobile ports for the older GTA games and other Rockstar properties, so even with how iffy this trailer looked, it seemed to be in good hands, as long as the games ran fine and played more or less the same they did before. Maybe Take-Two's bullshit antics would actually pay off. And that's the third strike, you're out. Don't pass go, don't collect $1 million, you are grounded from touching any other video games forever. I myself have not touched the GTA Trilogy Definitive Edition in any form, but I still feel I can proudly display my absolute disheartenment with how much of a technical and functional mess it turned out to be upon release. And this is Rockstar we're talking about here, a company that, besides having some of the most highly acclaimed and best-selling games of all time, are known for maintaining a high level of polish in each of those games from generation to generation. On top of all that crap, the first day of release saw the PlayStation version getting pulled for releasing in some territories too early, the PC version getting pulled as soon as the data miners found a shit ton of dev notes that they might have wanted to kept hidden, as well as the missing music from each of the game's soundtracks, and disabled code related to the infamous hot coffee mod in San Andreas. Oh, the Switch version just... Yeah, you probably should have given this more than 2 years of development, good sirs. Now, the initial response to this backlash wasn't very good, as the CEO for Grove Street Games stated he was enjoying the level of scrutiny on his studio and that they were still celebrating the launch regardless. Even if this wasn't supposed to be sarcastic, I don't think it's the best thing to post in response to or during the reference scrutinization. But whatever you say, dude, I'm sure the other developers receiving that same level of scrutiny are enjoying it just as much as you are. However, Rockstar themselves did put out a statement of their own quickly after that one, apologizing for the remaster's poor quality and promising to fix it as quickly as possible. They did offer something decent as penance too. Anyone who had bought the remasters would be eligible to receive the original games they had taken away in the first place for free until June 30th of next year. And only for PC users. Any PC users who didn't get the remasters could get those original games for $30. So get that shit while it's hot. Look. When the Pokemon Diamond and Pearl remakes somehow turned out better than this, it sounds like the current state of Rockstar Games is much shakier than I originally thought it was. You know, I was going to talk about that and the other remasters in greater detail after I'd finished kicking those Brits to the curb, but we've got a lot of shit to sift through after this, so consider these dishonorable mentions for the worst remasters and release debacles of the year. The aforementioned Pokemon Gen 4 remakes for continuing to poison the Pokemon discussion well despite being just fine, can't wait to see how the other one goes. Sonic Colors Ultimate for also being a technical mess, with the Switch version being just... The Switch Online expansion pass, cause there's no way Nindumbo can justify its price with how shitty an experience playing N64 games on that thing is. Looks like I'm just gonna have to snag Paper Mario on the Wii U eShop before that dies out. And last but certainly not least, Battlefield 2042. Yeah, at this point I'm just sticking with PUBG as my multiplayer mainstay. 2021 was also a year of recognition. For the folks over at the Wall Street Bets subreddit page, giving the year an amazing start by short squeezing the hell out of Gamestop stock, among others, and fucking over the short sellers and hedge funds that had been teabagging it for years. That was probably a bunch of gibberish to anyone not in the know, and that includes myself. And yeah, this is only tangentially related to games. It's also arguably not going to result in a big renaissance in the stock market for the common man, but seeing this play out was a feast for those dollar sign eyes nonetheless.
Let's put you out of your misery.
2021 was also a year of simply RE, as in Resident Evil. Capcom threw one heck of a bash for the franchise's 25th anniversary with Resident Evil Village, one of my favorite titles for the year. But for as worthy a celebration the game was in the eyes of many, that whole affair hit a bit of a snag after release. A Dutch filmmaker by the name of Richard Rophorst made a LinkedIn post accusing Capcom of plagiarizing his 2013 film, Frankenstein's Army, the most pertinent example of such being some of the monster designs, including this dude with a propeller strapped to its body, who's also known as Sturm. Looking at the designs side to side, the comparisons are rather striking, but I feel like leaving it at, oh yeah, they totally copied it from this movie, wouldn't make for a sufficient conclusion. So I checked out the movie to see how much merit there was to Rophorst's claims. It's actually kind of interesting. It's a found footage horror flick set during the end of World War II with these Russian dudes stumbling upon a monster-infested factory, and Frankenstein's Army is indeed quite a sight to behold with the variety of monsters on display, though most of them are just set pieces and incidentals to the main story, including the ones Capcom had been accused of copying. Oh yeah, about that, they totally copied it from this movie. Even the whole factory area in the game is very reminiscent of the one in the film.
Hey, did you see that? There's a little kid standing on the top of your stairs. What? Oh, now they're gone.
As blatant as this may be, and regardless of whether or not it was supposed to be an homage or because they just ran out of ideas and needed something, no further developments occurred here. I mean, getting hit with a lawsuit for uncredited material during what's supposed to be a wondrous occasion would be such a terrible thing for Capcom, wouldn't it? Yes, it would. Yes, it would. Anyway, about that lawsuit they got hit with for uncredited material. First, do you all remember that Capcom leak from late 2020? The one that pretty much spoiled their release plans for the next 4 years and also had a bunch of compromised personal information? Well, there was a lot more in there than just that stuff. And a month after Rophorst's outburst, Capcom found themselves in the middle of another outburst from artist, photographer, and designer Judy A. Jurisic, who had accused the company of lifting photos from several of her books, including her 1996 novel, Surfaces, and using them as textures for various games without contacting her to properly license those textures out. Guess where she had learned about it? Instead of leaving it at that, though, the designer went and filed a lawsuit against Capcom asking for at least 12 million smackers in damages. Like with Frank and Dankin, the comparisons provided in the article are quite damning, but if one were to go through the court documents, that would yield a staggering number of examples. Yeah, Capcom done goofed. Oh, they tried to get themselves out of this jam with a motion for dismissal on the basis that Jurisic was too late to claim any infringement, but that got thrown out, and from what I could gauge, it would appear they're now seeking for a settlement, which is about what I expected. I'm very surprised they managed to keep this hidden for so long, but once a leak of that scale occurs with this shit in it, what the fuck else was gonna happen? Who knows what else they have under that rug of theirs? So there was an update for the mobile port of this long-running South Korean-developed MMORPG back in January, and a South Korean player spent upwards of 160 million won towards it. Here's the conversion to dollars for that. However, weeks after they had published the update, the game's developers, NCSoft, rolled it back and compensated players who had spent money on it in diamonds, which I assume is what the game's premium currency is, and not, actual diamonds. But apparently this dude only got half of what he had put into it, and he was not happy about that. He rung up the company various times to try to get them back, to no avail, and they just said fuck it, went to their headquarters to demand an appointment with customer service, and when he was refused once more, he used his car to block the company's parking lot before finally, NCSoft called the cops on him. Jesus Christ. From here, NCSoft either compensated the dude back in full, or sued the hell out of him for pulling this shit, but I don't think that would be much of an issue for someone who had apparently spent upwards of 4 billion won on the game over the past 2 years. Here's the conversion again. If you can't tell, this is where that whole outright batshit insanity thing comes into play. If this is the kind of shit that can happen with these kinds of games and fans of those games, I have to wonder if something like Genshin Impact will ever see something of this sort. I mean, besides bitching about new characters. Oh, well, never mind about that.
The offices of the Associated Press and Al Jazeera were flattened.
Another word to aptly describe this year is reignition, as in the reignition of bloodshed between Israel and Palestine. Following protests and clashes between Palestinian civilians and Israeli security forces, both saw a 2-week period of fighting that included rocket attacks, airstrikes, and other means of harm that resulted in wide-scale destruction and scores of deaths and injuries, most of them being Palestinians. Yeah, it's pretty clear who had the real power in this situation, but we're not here for an in-depth analysis on the latest development for one of the longest conflicts in modern history, and I'm sure those who haven't clicked off on the video are now wondering why this is being brought up at all. Well, during the midpoint of that period, several gaming news outlets put up articles encouraging their readers to donate to charities whose funds would go towards aiding the injured in Palestine. However, a few days after those went up, 2 publications had taken down their contributions, those being Game Informer and IGN. And what's better is that neither of them offered any explanation whatsoever as to why this was done, until IGN put out a Twitter post a few days afterwards that stated they had removed their article because it had given off the impression that they were taking sides in the conflict. Okay, let's see how this goes. I get that the complicated history here doesn't exactly make for a night and day explanation, and that choosing sides could have consequences of some sort no matter what reason is given. But even with the clear-cut numbers we have on hand, who the fuck cares about choosing sides? These human beings are in need of some kind of assistance, and all this does is make your publication look like a spineless coward. But whatever. Is their decision, is their choice, so if it ended here, then I guess that's that. Except it didn't end there. The same day that tweet had been posted, a Medium piece signed off by a good portion of the company's editorial staff popped up claiming that the article's takedown was a decision made by their management at Ziff Davis and J2 Global. They further claimed that they had no say in this choice and were also in the dark as to why this had been done until they received an email containing the exact same statement us viewers saw in the tweet, summing up their frustrations at the end by demanding their corporate overseers acknowledge their responsibility in taking down the post and get it republished. Initially, it seemed like corporate would comply, but in a follow-up meeting, the chief content editor, Pierce Schneider, threw himself and the rest of the team under the bus by claiming full responsibility and absolving the upper management of any involvement. Okay, so this shows that they were responsible. Good to know, Pierre. Thank you very much. This internal conflict reached such a high that it was eventually decided to have a portion of IGN's employees form a council of sorts to work with management and a chosen third-party ombudsman in fixing up the original article. A process that took an additional 3 months to see completion before the piece was finally reposted onto this sacred holy land we call the internet. So, what changes were made to satisfy everyone involved? They removed Palestinian in the very first sentence, added in a mention of the few Israeli deaths that occurred during this conflict, switched around the charity link so that the first one readers would see wasn't one referencing Palestine, while adding in a few more links, and they put up a few paragraphs at the very start of the article explaining why the post was initially removed, while saying this kind of fiasco would never happen again. So all in all, this shit was a massive waste of time. Oh yeah, and I missed this part. They removed the whole police brutality bit from the Doctors Without Borders section. Yeah, real nice, real smooth. If I had to hazard a guess, the initial takedown was influenced somewhat by IGN's Israeli sector, who had put up a post of their own criticizing the article for not siding with Israel in this situation, as evidenced by the Palestine flag featured next to the IGN logo. Well, I hope they and the other jackasses involved here are happy with this outcome. It was certainly worth it. Now let's see what Game Informer did in the midst of all this. Yeah, maybe that short squeeze was a mistake and we should have just left GameStop to die.
Overworked and full of stress, he'll clean up any kind of mess. Up at dawn and down by dusk, he's the one that you can trust. When times are hard and miserable, he'll fix things with a stride. A cup of coffee in one hand and 2 bags under his eyes. The misadventures of Regis Dayron, the unpaid intern who you can depend on.
Hello? What do you mean the community manager quit? What did you do? Give me a minute. Okay, so you want me to deal with this instead? Okay, all right. I can do that. I can handle that. But before I do, fuck you. I quit. Bye. Another word to sum up this year would have to be regret, which I'm sure we're all feeling right now because of the inordinate amount of time we have collectively spent sitting on our asses and staring into the sun instead of doing something productive or interesting. Or maybe that's just me, but I'm more so talking about the hype surrounding Blue Box Games, another Dutch media developer of sorts. Huh, how coincidental. These guys released a teaser for their upcoming video game back in April, titled Abandoned. And they described it as an open-world cinematic survival horror simulator that would take advantage of all the PS5's features. The teaser didn't really show any of that off, but it somehow ended up sending parts of the gaming community in a fervor thanks to rumors suggesting that this was another PT situation and Hideo Kojima was involved with the project because folks will never let Silent Hills go. Jeff Keighley replying to the announcement tweet did not help matters, but Blue Box was quick to categorically deny these rumors. And yet, once a rumor like this takes hold, it will not go away that easily. Especially if a whole subreddit dedicated to continuously blowing it up and labeling itself as the Blue Box Conspiracy spawns out of the woodworks. Since then, more rumors kept piling up, including a thread of comparisons between this and Kojima's past stunts showing up on the Gaming Leaks subreddit. Blue Box continued denying all these claims and simultaneously played into them because why not? And this whole cycle reached its peak when they finally announced that an app for Abandoned would be available in August and provide players with more information regarding what the hell this thing was. Yep, it wasn't a trailer, wasn't a demo, wasn't even a playable teaser, just an app. But who knows, maybe this will clear everything up and these guys will have lived up to these high expectations. And then it got delayed for a day due to technical issues. And then it got delayed another day. And then Blue Box finally got it up on the store so we could all see what this 5 GB app was, which at least indicates something is in it. And there was nothing. Just a part of the teaser they had already shown off, and a bunch of placeholder boxes and text. Needless to say, folks weren't pleased with this app, and the main dude behind it, Hassan Karaman, I don't give a shit if I mispronounced that, once again blamed technical issues regarding the game engine they were using, Unreal 5, while further stating that the game wasn't actually called Abandoned, and the actual name for it would be given later, as well as an actual product of sorts, and not whatever the fuck they're trying to pull here. You know what though? I'll give them credit. This app did clear something up for us. And that would be how these fellas are up to something, and it seems like it doesn't involve releasing a finished game. One of the more useful threads on the Blue Box Conspiracy subreddit points towards a history of unfinished games from this team, all of it not putting Blue Box in a very positive light. Whether this is due to it being some long-term con, or they really are just that incompetent and poorly organized, it doesn't look like this pattern is going to be broken anytime soon. I'd like to be proven wrong, and they very much could do that in the next year or so, but it certainly sounds like they're already abandoning this project too.
Damn!
When Storm Dane analyzing each of the Oregon locales Ben's studio recreated in this game makes me far more interested in playing it than any marketing could have, especially now with its lead designer whining about people not buying it at full price. Well, let's just say I wasn't shocked to learn that he had recently left the company prior to this interview thanks to what he described as personality clashes. I'm also not shocked this interview was conducted by David Jaffe, the former God of War director who experienced personality clashes of his own, leading to his departure from Eat, Sleep, Play, so he could go on and make another independent studio that cratered into the ground following the release of Drawn to Death. Well, it's a good thing he kept a low profile for the rest of the year.
Falling occupants of interplanetary crime.
Why would I ever have known to do that?
There is nothing in the visual.
Bullshit. Why would anyone know to do that?
They wouldn't. They fucking wouldn't. Crap, Bush League. This should not get a pass.
Would you believe this dude's following plateaued after this fiasco? But that is not why the latest game in the Metroid series is here. There were some larger, more notable, though similarly embarrassing incidents involving the game at the time of its release. First, there was that Kotaku article showcasing how the game could run at 4K on Switch emulators, which they put up a mere 2 days after its release. And while they did try to be cute about it, Nintendo went and reached out to their stupid asses, demanding they emphasize that this article wasn't promoting piracy for their games. And obviously it reintroduced the debate over piracy in games, and if it is so morally righteous or not, but it didn't go anywhere, and I'm honestly sick of this wheel-spinning argument. So let's get to the more significant controversy. A short time after that, former members of Dread's co-developer Mercury Steam made LinkedIn posts of their own that simultaneously congratulated them on the game's success and pointed out they weren't properly credited for their work on the game. This included a senior 3D artist, a 3D character animator, and some other folks who chose to remain anonymous. When questioned as to whether or not this was the case for them and others, a representative from the company stated that developers would only get credited if they had worked on the project for at least a quarter of its whole development, which in this case was at least 1 whole year. Oh lord, doesn't this sound so familiar? Yeah, it turns out Rockstar isn't the only company with this kind of lame-ass arbitrary crediting policy in place. And this wasn't even the only instance of this shit happening this year. I don't really have much to add because we've been here before, and it's not like the problem is any different. There's still no mandated crediting policy within the industry, just something the IGDA put together as a suggested policy and haven't updated in years. Worse, Mercury Steam got hit with additional accusations that included poor working conditions and a general toxic environment for the past several years. Not helped at all by the whole pandemic. It's always such a great feeling when I learn that these things I love so very much were made under high-stress scenarios like these. Ideally, they get their shit together, but if shit ain't changed by this point, they probably ain't gonna get their shit together. And I'll be there to swap their souls away and convert them into the Lord's side. Anyone got $10? That's the minimum for the blackjack table. Oh god, I can already tell this is gonna be so much fun. Guess what the RE word will be by the end of this part, and I'll give you one of my toes. Five Nights at Freddy, one of the biggest gaming series of the 2010s, a fucking pop culture phenomenon, and it contains a very inspiring development tale from its creator, Scott Cawthon. Y'all probably know how it goes, but it does bear repeating. Dude made some creepy looking games, tried to get them onto Steam, they got shat on for looking very creepy, and instead of either quitting entirely or going down the path of digital homicide or the Day of Dragons guy, he just threw up his hands and made a kid-friendly horror game that became a massive success beyond his wildest dreams. This is all well and good, it is still one of my favorite game development stories, but things kind of shifted over the summer. During that time, a Twitter post started making the rounds featuring screen caps of several donations to political candidates and PACs from Mr. Cawthon. This information is publicly available on a site that has been tracking this kind of data since the early 80s, but let's just go through the list here and see who the man donated to, just for funsies. Ben Carson, Devin Nunes, Mitch McConnell, Tulsi Gabbard. Oh dear. To say that folks following his work, or FNAF fans, were upset over these revelations is a slight understatement. So much so, the man had to put up a response to all this on the FNAF Reddit instead of Twitter. He tried to explain why he had donated to these folks, and emphasized his love for the community, and LGBT folk in particular, as well as how he wouldn't be budging from his political status even after being doxxed and harassed by some of his newfound detractors. Oh dear. In spite of standing up to the Twitter bullies and receiving all kinds of support from fellow Redditors, the backlash was just too much for him to handle, and he announced his retirement from game development nearly a week after those tweets surfaced, saying he would be appointing a successor to helm the FNAF series from that point forward. Now, I appreciate that the man calmly responded to the outrage and didn't go mask off with a huge tirade or anything like that, but I don't appreciate the dismissiveness he appeared to show regarding the obvious incongruity between those LGBT folks in the FNAF community and these significant donations towards figures that had attempted to or succeeded in pushing out policies that could have or did significant damage to that community. He can claim to care about these folks all he wants and how he was aware that other political candidates would have been less likely to, I don't know, do stuff like this. But that doesn't change how he directly gave them those funds. And considering other events involved with that party, frankly I don't have much room for sympathy here. At least he was wise to keep those beliefs to himself and not put them anywhere in the game, and I think that still remains even with the latest entry, as far as I can tell. On the other hand, I highly doubt he'll stop contributing to funds like these, and I also highly doubt he'll stop receiving residuals from the IP one way or another. At least I won't have to worry about giving him more money, because I only got the first game from way back in the day. So in the end, we all win. Oh yeah, and the word was Republican.
Welcome to this world.
You know, while I'm damn sure I'll receive some heat for that last segment, I have a gut feeling this segment will be more contentious. But it's a lot easier to make fun of, so who cares? And I know of a very good word to describe all this stuff, but I think you can also figure that out for yourselves. One of the biggest technology crazes we saw in the past year was the rise of NFTs, aka non-fungible tokens. Of course, to the uninitiated, the most common response to that would be, what the hell are non-fungible tokens? In technical terms, they're supposed to be unique digital items stored on what's called a blockchain, which is essentially a more secure database where said data is organized in blocks that are chained together in chronological order, so that once it's there, it can't be edited without editing every block that came before it. These items can be a myriad of things like music, cards, digital art, AI-generated art, stolen art, etc., and they generate a unique link to the site housing said item for the owner to flaunt and cherish and boast about until the link either expires or gets hacked. I don't know if that's necessarily the correct way to describe these, and I'll freely admit, I don't get them at all, but regardless, it's been quite a lucrative venture for anyone engaging with it. However, outside of those engaging with the cryptosphere, or rich people, it looks like some of the most useless crap the internet has ever spat out. But really, that could just be applied to most luxury items. There's also the large amounts of power required to create these items and mint them on the blockchain, as the saying goes, that aren't doing a whole lot of good to the constantly degrading environment our fat asses live in. And more importantly, unlike, say, a limited edition Pikachu Pokemon card, if you know you know, a lot of it can be easily reproduced through a variety of methods, but the most common of which would be a good old-fashioned right-click save. Yeah, that's the most common critique, but it doesn't make it any less true. Bottom line, I don't get the appeal of NFTs. So, naturally, several parts of the gaming industry went all in on this new craze, because anything with the slightest hint of profit attached to it will get eaten up by those guys. A lot of this happened pretty late into the year, so there's not too much material, but several companies came out in support of NFTs, and it's the least surprising ones too. Ubisoft announced their attempt to integrate that shit into their games with Ubisoft Quartz. EA faced the world and blurted out with all their might that this shit was the future of games. And just as the new year began, Square Enix pledged to throw their hat into the NFT shit ring too. Of course, Ubisoft Quartz's announcement vid had to be unlisted, and that glorified skin-selling market is pretty dire as of this moment. The EA guy had no idea how any of this was going to work, in spite of being so sure it was the future of games. And Square was also aware that this was probably not a popular move for them to make, but with this they would attract a brand new audience and just rake in all those profits. I do feel for the EA guy though, because I don't know how this shit's going to work either. And I don't see it being very popular with the large audiences they already have in any way whatsoever. All this is gonna do is waste a lot of money, power, and time for anyone who puts their hands on this shit, further tainting each of their mostly tainted reputations, such as the sad case of the G4 TV revival.
But maybe later we'll get to talk about Crypto Beefcakes, which is a project that you tie an NFT to a Discord account, and then if you're a positive influence in a community, it actually inflates the value of your NFT. So heaven forbid we have avatars and communities that encourage people to be kind and supportive to increase the value of something. But apparently, that's the thing that gets me canceled today.
Jesus Christ, the only thing they could do here that's more embarrassing than this is air the Scott DeWaz TV show uncensored.
Of course, being battery powered meant more times than not when I'd want to play one of these things, I'd pull it out of storage and go, oh fucking shit, I left this thing on for a month.
Something in my research I found more interesting than any of this, though, would have to be how there have already been several games with blockchain technology implemented into their mechanics. Like, this stuff didn't just rise from the mud over the past 12 months, they've been here for quite a few years. Yes, it's only been relegated to mobile games like CryptoKitties, Axie Infinity, something from 2012 called The Sandbox that was retrofitted into this type of game after being bought out by a dev specializing in them. But if you recall, there was a game that we covered in last year's Controversies I Missed video that purported to be using this kind of technology, Cooking Mama Cookstar. Although they later explained that this was just a way to try to attract investors. Which is very weird in retrospect, because these games involve making your own digital creations and monetizing them through the Ethereum blockchain. How the hell was that going to work for a Cooking Mama game on the Switch? Maybe AI-generated recipes? Well, that could explain the rainbow grilled cheese. Perhaps the biggest entry in this newfound genre from 2021 that I still don't believe any of you have ever heard of would have to be Blanco's Block Party, which has a similar make-your-own digital figure kind of deal, but also features user-generated platforming stages that kind of makes it all look like if Fall Guys had NFT content within it. Thankfully, we do have companies that are completely against NFTs and any kind of blockchain crap, like Valve, who went and banned these kinds of games from being sold on Steam, and Mr. Fuck the Oscars, who said he'd rather be shot than indulge in NFTs. The general attitude towards them, as far as I can tell, is pretty much on the same wavelength. So, bottom line, I don't get the appeal for NFTs, and a lot of other people don't either. So keep that shit out.
Later, we'll get to talk about Crypto Beefcakes, which is a project that you tie an NFT to a and then if you're in a community, it actually inflates the value of your So heaven for fucking we have avatars and communities that encourage people to be kind and supportive, that encourage people to be a woman's nipple, to increase the value of your dick. But apparently, well, you're all
To even the toughest among us.
The misadventures of Regis Dayron, the unpaid intern who you can depend on.
Okay, look, I know my position here means that I really have no say on this matter, but if you'll allow me to, I'd like to provide some advice, okay? Okay, don't do this. Because it's an exact copy and people are going to notice! Alright, fine. Just go ahead with it. I don't give a shit, just don't call me when the fallout occurs, alright? Okay, cool, bye.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation.
Yeah, it's me. Yeah, you saw that video, right? Okay, well, you'll be happy to know that I would be more than willing to assist you with the shit you're gonna get from this. But before I do, fuck you, I quit. 2021 was also a year about video game regulation. And for this one, I want to give y'all a little glimpse into the wonderful world of young Even as he remembers his past. He acquired a strong love for video games during his youth, at points bordering on obsession, and his parents noticed this early on, so to try and prevent it from getting out of hand, they restricted his video game playtime to a 2-hour period on weekend days, with the occasional freebie and holiday here and there. Now, in some ways, this contributed positively towards his development as a youth, in that he maintained a good GPA and focused his attention on other time-wasting parts of his life, like drawing comics, watching cartoons, playing the viola, and eventually following content creators on YouTube that led him down the path he's still riding today. God help him. But a point came where his love for video games could not be contained, and once he got his hands on a handheld console, all bets were off with him abiding by those rules. He would get caught from time to time, and subsequently punished, but he would continue to play these dastardly games as much as possible. So by the end of his time in high school, his parents had given up trying to control his instincts and let him have free reign. Thankfully, it doesn't appear that these restrictions resulted in his extreme social awkwardness and shunning that occurred due to said awkwardness growing up, as the major factor in that was he was just an idiot who didn't know how to properly talk to people, like so many other kids could. So, when adult Even became aware of China planning to reduce allowed game time for people under 18 to a single-hour period on weekend days and specific holidays to try and lessen game addiction, he felt the slightest sense of nostalgia, and more than a little sympathy for those affected by this. Then again, those fellows mostly have freemium mobile games and Even grew up wanting to play nothing but Mario Golf Toadstool Tour, so he can't relate to it as much as he'd like to. But don't get me wrong though, China's whole history with video games and how the game markets there, legitimate or otherwise, formed under the countless restrictions companies get placed under is quite fascinating. But, I mean, I can't really add much more here other than, that's China for ya. At least they banned NFTs.
I'm trying to get down to the root of the apple, the deepest I could in them chains. My clan like. Oh my god, ass everywhere. I would suck all the guys. Everybody go follow my Twitter. It's great. 1% nothing is it all. Your team fun, my ass. Just an Excel on Twitter. Go follow me.
Yeah, this is what happens when you don't check your conference call settings, kids. And it took a very hilarious 15 minutes for them to mute that shit so they could start the trial. Anyway, I expected a resolution to Epic's big litigation against the Big Apple. No, not them, the other Big Apple. And we sure as hell got something. To refresh y'all on the subject, in 2020, Epic had stuck in a direct payment method for the mobile version of Fortnite to try and circumvent the huge fee Apple and Google take through their own singular payment system, resulting in both companies removing the game and Epic's developer account from their respective mobile stores for violating their terms of service. Epic hit them back with lawsuits claiming they had violated antitrust policies through barring third-party payment systems from being allowed within most digital content apps, and seeks to dismantle that policy as well as tear apart what they perceive as a duopoly between the two to open the path up for more methods of mobile app distribution in general beyond these two stores. Like, for example, a mobile Epic Games Store. It was pretty ballin' to see Epic pull a gut move like this, but other than that, I was quite dismissive and uninterested in this lawsuit, because it's pretty clear that's what their end goal was, but if Epic did get their way here, it would certainly send shockwaves throughout mobile app development and distribution. In the case regarding Apple, though, that didn't quite happen. In September, the judge presiding over that case arrived at the conclusion that the App Store's structure did not violate antitrust or monopoly laws and allowed Apple to continue restraining Epic from reinstating its dev account there. However, they also found that Apple was breaking the law by forcing app developers to implement payments through the App Store and not offering users third-party alternatives, and ordered the company to cease that policy within the next 90 days. Okay, that's 1 out of 2, but it's better than nothing, right? Well, Apple motioned for a delay in these proceedings, which was initially denied by the judge, but after they made an appeal to a higher court, the company was granted that delay, so now we have to wait for who knows how long for any further developments. Honestly, considering the more significant part of the lawsuit didn't go anywhere, I am once again very much disinterested in seeing how this plays out. I mean, it's probably going to happen at some point this year anyway, so stay tuned for part 3. Oh yeah, and stay tuned for Google too, because they ended up countersuing Epic just a few months ago. Fun times seem to be ahead here.
The misadventures of Regis Day, Ron the unpaid intern who you can depend.
Yeah, it's me. Yeah, you already know what I'm gonna say, right? Okay, cool. Bye. Oh, God.
Go get your friends.
And if y'all couldn't get enough legal disputes, here's one that's sure to knock your socks off. So, Medabots, the multimedia franchise, spawned from a late 90s Game Boy RPG that became wildly popular in Japan and has maintained a good cult following elsewhere since. There hasn't been a whole lot of activity with it as of late, but this past year saw its very name at the center of a trademark dispute between the series' current publisher, Imagineer, and some dude in Spain. Yeah, it sounds pretty silly, and after I did a little bit of digging into the dispute, it's not just pretty silly, it's completely fucking ridiculous. It's not an RE word, but that's close enough. It all began when this presumably young Spanish lad named Kevin pursued his dream to create a Medabots game of his very own, having been such a huge fan of the series for years on end. So he did what any other fan would do and snatched up an expired trademark for the word Medabots within the European Union. This specific Medabots trademark was last used there by Kodansha, the company responsible for publishing the various manga adaptations for the franchise. And expired back in 2012, so I guess it went under the radar and was just up for grabs. So considering this, Kevin also filed for a regional trademark in the US for good measure. Now, Imagineer obviously wasn't aware of this until they attempted to publish a worldwide release for a mobile entry in the Medabots series, or Medarot, as it actually goes by in Japan. No, seriously, that is what it's called. It's not me doing it in English. Kevin attempted to inform the company that he was now the proper owner of the Medabots in this area, which they ignored completely, so he did what any loyal fan would do and got a fucking restraining order against Imagineer, preventing them from releasing any Medarot-related stuff on mobile platforms within that region. Imagineer filed an objection to that restraining order, as well as a full counterclaim in an attempt to get that trademark back in their hands. We'll get back to this ourselves in just a second, but while this was happening, Kevin was working on putting that trademark to good use while he still could. He tried to gain some additional funding through Indiegogo, but that failed spectacularly because, just look at it. So Kevin linked up with some fellow Medabots fans and did what any massive fan of a niche franchise wanting to remain faithful to the series would do: turn it into an NFT project. Boom! Full circle, baby! That's exactly the shit I love seeing. But yeah, seriously, this is what they're actually trying to do here. I have here a massive Twitter thread from software engineer and small-time indie developer Jonathan Holmes, where he describes the nature of Kevin's game in lengthy detail, and even provided me with some extra details not seen in that thread when I DM'd him in my research to untangle this mess. To sum it up, those fans Kevin teamed up with are actually cryptocurrency enthusiasts, and they didn't just want to have NFTs in it, no sir, they decided to make their own cryptocurrency along with it. Players would use that to buy NFT robot parts and build their Medabots for fighting and junk. It is kind of similar to how the main gameplay in the series works, to my knowledge, but there's also the highly innovative feature where players can use that crypto to predict the outcome of fights or PvP matches, aka gambling. So far, they've only released one trailer that, well, just look at it, and there haven't been many updates on that front except them hyping the shit out of this shit and the shitcoin, even though that's been tanking in value as the days go by. As for that trademark dispute, there was a lot of back and forth and extensions from Kevin for him to keep that Medabot's name, which the court kept giving him for some reason. But this past December, Imagineer announced that the EU ruled in their favor, as they believe that Kevin had bought the TM in bad faith in order to do all of this. Well, I have no idea why you think that, Your Honor, as you can plainly tell he owns the Medabot's name. And yeah, he owns the name. You can trust me on this. Please. They're giving the dude a month to appeal, and as of recording this audio, there hasn't been anything beyond that. Though Mr. Holmes has reassured me that Kevin is pretty much fucked. Looking at all the data, the dude's clearly in over his head and is being strung along by these shady crypto bros wanting to make some quick cash. It's kinda sad that this might be the biggest attention Medabots has received over here in years, but it's a good thing Imagineer appears to be etching out a win in this scenario. Let's just hope they don't have any other expired trademarks out in the wild. Speaking of unexpected revivals that I didn't see coming at all, 6 Days in Fallujah's back. Yay? This tactical shooter was originally announced in 2009 for modern consoles and PCs and set itself apart from your CODs and Medal of Honors by adapting the real-life Second Battle of Fallujah that happened during the real-life Iraqi War, while featuring the real-life perspective of real-life US Marines and real-life civilians who were fighting there in the real life. The problem with it, though, was that said war was still ongoing at the time, and not too many folks were clamoring for it to get the video game treatment this soon. And that's not even factoring in the controversial nature of this battle in particular, as well as the entire Iraqi war. These criticisms mostly came from the UK, but were all a combination of general disgust towards the game, accusations of war crimes, and calls for it to be cancelled. So naturally, the developer, Atomic Games, dissuaded any of those criticisms by stating it wouldn't be focusing on the politics and would be focusing on telling an accurate historical recreation of these soldiers' stories, while promising it to be the most realistic shooter of them all. Sadly, that didn't quite quell the anger in any way whatsoever, so the game's publisher, Konami, dropped out of the project, leaving Atomic Games floundering about before they shuttered a few years later. The game was never officially cancelled though, and in the intervening years, its lead designer, Peter Tamte, would pop up on occasion to remind the world that it would see the light of day one way or another. Well, earlier this year, his new publishing company, Victora, announced the game's revival and intended late 2021 release for modern PCs and consoles, with the new developer for it being Highwire Games, a company founded by former Bungie alumni, including one of the composers for the Halo games. So, how did folks react to the surprise rebirth of what may be the most controversial unreleased game since Thrillkill? Well, a combination of general disgust towards it, accusations of racism, and calls for it to be cancelled, including a petition with a lot more signatures than I expected it to have. And how did the developer respond to these criticisms? By stating it wouldn't be focusing on the politics, and yeah, the more things change, the larger my ass gets. The obvious difference between then and now is that the war in Iraq is no longer ongoing, so perhaps they believed bringing it back now wouldn't cause as much of a fuss. And obviously, they were wrong. Like, that whole ordeal is still one of the most controversial fights in the entire war, and the war itself is still as controversial as it was 10 years ago. However, Tamte and crew did wise up a bit in the face of this backlash, putting up an additional statement where they recognized that no matter what story they tried to tell here, the events recreated in the game are inseparable from politics. They still maintain that the main goal of it was to tell this story of urban warfare that no other medium could ever tell. So, yeah, I don't see this ending well. Not just because of how potentially messy this story could be, but more so with how attitudes towards these kinds of games have, well, shifted in the past decade, as I noted with CI Games' review event fiasco. The gameplay trailer didn't do a whole lot to impress either, although the idea of procedurally generated environments is certainly intriguing. Then again, that might just be thanks to the wasted hours I've sunk into Returnal over the past month. Regardless, 6 Days in Fallujah missed its 2021 release, as Tamte stated the development team doubled in size, as did the scope and scale of the game, so now it's been slated for a late 2022 release. Whether or not this is history repeating itself remains to be seen, but this is still one of the most interesting things to happen in game controversy this year, and I'm definitely keeping my eye out for further developments. Also, yeah, Returnal's pretty good. I'll be talking about it on the next Crazy Thoughts. I fucking hate it. But of course, we need to save the best for last. And I'll start by listing off the several other controversies that were heightened thanks to this one, and could have easily been featured in their own segment if I wanted to. I mean, the video's already a fucking hour long, let's just keep stretching it out as far as it can go. Keep feeding that bitch of an algorithm. First, we have Sony, who did get some brownie points for sticking up to Activision, but oh dearie me, that gender discrimination lawsuit they got hit with does not mesh too well with their stance, now does it? There's also the whole PS3 Vita digital store crap they tried pulling, but let's not lose focus here. Riot Games. They got hit with the class action lawsuit back in 2018 for a heaping number of allegations that finally saw its conclusion just as the year itself concluded. The company agreed to pay 100 million buckaroos to settle legal fees and satiate the folks who sued their ass, as well as be subjected to heavy and very much not fun scrutiny by a third-party moderator to ensure workplace conditions change for the better and that they stay that way. Then we have Bungie, who had already separated from Activision long ago, but whose influence appears to have lingered if this report on their toxic work culture has anything to say about them, as that resulted in their head of HR stepping down. On the indie side, y'all remember that little segment we had for Ben Judd and Dangan Entertainment back in the 2019 vid? Well, the person who wrote that expose did a follow-up this year, admonishing the team behind the Fight Night game in the aftermath of that shit, and leaving them entirely. So yeah, continue avoiding those guys. Oh, and we can't forget about the Game Awards, now can we, Jeff? I mean, your statement at the start, it was so powerful. And this new Star Wars game, oh my god, it looks so great! And there were likely more companies hit with the same stuff that I'm either forgetting or directly omitting for time purposes, but none of these, even the Riot Games one, reached the height of the ongoing Activision Blizzard lawsuit. Now, for those of you expecting me to rip into them here in the traditional manner, you're gonna be disappointed. For that, you can just go to my Twitter and just search for any tweet where I used the word Christ in the past half year, and that'll get you up to speed. No, I grow tired of debate. I want to do something a little bit more flavorful to the ears. Maybe even a call for some retribution.
Nothing bad ever happens to me. Nothing bad ever happens to me. Why should I care? A man who writes this personal cloak and then he threatened a life and then he do his work. He built to treat his employees right, put the women through all sorts of hell, and I can't believe that anyone would want to do such a terrible thing. Why should I care? Did you hear about the men in the guys were sweet and they terrorized every woman they meet? With the men that way for many long years, men is stuck in the hood, man. And I can't believe that anyone would want to do such a terrible thing. But why should I care? Why should I care? The employees finally came around. The company was soon and the stock went down. It's weird to think on days like these that I'm still fine, 'cause I can't believe nothing bad ever happens to me. 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 Why should I care?
Completely or plant anything that EA has ever done.
Why should I care?
The company behind Candy Crush is having a rough time.
Why should I care? They did it back down and fought the case, but the workers said they won't be displaced. Wish I could help them in some way, but then I heard something from the news today. The workers demanded restitution and came up with the worst solution. They called on the boss to resign and said they
Okay, yeah, no, I get what you're doing, but I just think people are going to accuse you of copying, you know. Alright, fine, just deal with it. Fucking deal with it. It's all your problem now. Hey, what do you mean I'm just a construct of your imagination? I just... Oh. Okay, then. Eat shit, Bobby.